Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, in London, Maxine Jack lived a quiet life with her husband Derek, a man she believed loved her for who she was. But when she overhears Derek complaining about her holding him back, she discovers the truth. He sees her as an obstacle to his success. What Derek doesn't know is that Maxine is the heir to a $200 billion empire, hiding her true identity to live a life of simplicity. As Derek's ambitions and infidelities grow, Maxine begins to plot her revenge, using her wealth and influence to reclaim her life. This story unfolds with a powerful twist, revealing Maxine's rise from betrayal to strength as she reclaims her rightful place in the world, leaving Derek with nothing but the consequences of his actions. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest stories. Attention all lovers of suspense and drama. Halt what you're doing and hit subscribe now. Do you believe love can overcome any obstacle? Think again. Hit that like button and leave your thoughts in the comments. Are you ready to uncover a tale of betrayal that will leave you breathless? The first crack in Maxine Jack's heart didn't come with an angry outburst. It arrived in the form of a whisper, one she overheard from her own husband. "She's holding me back," Derek Jack muttered into his phone, his voice low but dripping with bitterness. He had no idea Maxine was standing just outside the hallway, her hands still damp from doing dishes, and her breath caught somewhere between her chest and throat. It wasn't just the words that stung the most. It was the cold certainty in his voice, the way he spoke of her as if she were a hindrance, not a partner. For 7 years, Maxine had given herself to him without question. She traded the frantic pace of corporate boardrooms for bake sales and swapped expensive wardrobes for discounted finds. She tended a small garden, volunteered at the local library, and prepared every meal from scratch in their modest home in a quiet corner of London. Her days had been simple, predictable, and until recently filled with love, or so she had believed. Derek had always been her world, handsome, driven, and naturally charismatic. He worked as a financial analyst in the bustling heart of the city, a job that promised greater things in time. To his colleagues, he was someone on the verge of success. But to Maxine, he was the man she thought loved her for who she was, not for the life she could provide. Derek often expressed his frustration with his situation, lamenting how he lacked the wealth and connections to climb the corporate ladder. Maxine listened, patiently masking the truth. She could have easily written him a check large enough to buy the entire city he dreamed of dominating. But Maxine wasn't just anyone. She wasn't the orphaned girl from a small forgotten town. She was Maxine D. Costa, heir to the D. Costa Group, a global empire worth over $200 billion, spanning industries like technology, real estate, and energy. The world knew the D. Costa name, but Maxine had kept it hidden. She had met Derek during her final year at a prestigious London university, studying art history under a false name, seeking to escape the relentless expectations of her billion-dollar family. When she was 18, her parents, Elijah and Helen D. Costa, died in a tragic plane crash, leaving her in the care of her formidable grandmother, Augusta D. Costa. Grief-stricken and burdened by her inherited wealth, Maxine longed for a simple life, away from the overwhelming shadows of her family. Derek had seemed like the answer to her prayers, a scholarship student with passion in his eyes who treated her like an equal, not an asset. When he suggested they live a modest life together, away from the glare of high society, Maxine felt a sense of peace. She put her fortune into a blind trust, managed by the family lawyer Xavier Santos, and told Derek she had nothing to offer but her heart. For years, Maxine believed she had made the right choice. Their life together revolved around small, cherished moments: morning coffee, Sunday walks, handwritten notes in his lunch. Derek seemed content until the cracks began to show. It started subtly: complaints about her clothes, their inability to afford vacations, and the things his colleagues boasted about. He began comparing her to the wives of his wealthier friends, women decked out in diamonds and designer gowns. "Did you see Daniel's fiancée's ring?" He'd say after work events. "It must be 10 carats. Her dad's a shipping tycoon in Singapore." Then his gaze would drop to Maxine's modest gold band, and his lip would curl ever so slightly. Yet Maxine loved him. She convinced herself it was just the stress of his career. Once he found success, everything would return to the way it was. But the bitterness in his tone only grew sharper, and the distance between them became more noticeable. Then came the day she overheard him on the phone. "She's holding me back," he repeated, his voice filled with disdain. "If I had someone with real connections, I could be closing multi-million-pound deals." Maxine stood frozen in the hallway, her mind racing. He didn't realize that the someone he longed for was standing just 10 feet away. Every bill paid, every meal cooked, every moment of stability in his life had been built on the foundation of a woman who could have bought and sold the entire company he worked for. That night, she sat on the edge of their bed watching him sleep. The moonlight illuminated the contours of his face, the same face she had once held in her hands, believing it was the face of her forever. But now she saw something different. The ambition that had once attracted her was twisting into greed. The love that once felt secure was becoming brittle and transactional. The next morning, Maxine made the decision not to confront him. Not yet. She needed certainty. Over the next few weeks, she observed him more closely. She noticed the long work dinners, the faint trace of expensive perfume on his shirts, and the lies he casually told about where he had been and who he had met. Then one Friday he came home late, his tie askew, his hair carrying the faint scent of jasmine and champagne. "Big night," he said with a grin. "Closed a deal." "You wouldn't understand." Maxine smiled faintly. "Not because I don't understand, but because I understand more than you think." That night, as Derek slept soundly, Maxine opened her laptop and sent a secure message to Xavier Santos. She hadn't contacted him in years, but this message was clear. "Activate protocol." His response came swiftly. "Understood. Would you like to proceed fully?" Her fingers hovered over the keys. As soon as she replied, there would be no going back. But the image of Derek, hunched over his phone, speaking about her as if she were a burden, burned in her mind. "Yes," she typed. "Prepare everything." The next morning, Maxine served Derek his coffee. She listened to him ramble on about a colleague's extravagant engagement party, masking her fury with a quiet smile. He didn't notice the change in her demeanor, the way she carefully measured each word she spoke. Because Maxine was no longer just his wife. She was a woman preparing for a battle, and Derek had no idea that the empire he craved was already hers to command. Within a month, he would learn the truth. But Maxine was far from finished. She discreetly invested in a series of strategic acquisitions through holding companies registered under different names. Derek didn't know it, but the rumors he was hearing at work about mysterious investors buying up assets in his industry all led back to her. The very ground beneath his career was shifting, and he was too busy taking his mistress to dinner to notice. At home, she played her part to perfection. She asked about his day, laughed in all the right places, and even cooked his favorite meals. It was a performance that would have fooled anyone but the actress herself. Behind the quiet smile, she was memorizing his habits, noting every lie, every absence, every financial transaction he tried to hide. The private investigator found something Maxine had suspected but not confirmed. Derek had opened a separate bank account. It wasn't much yet, but the deposits were suspiciously timed to his meetings with clients. Maxine didn't confront him. She simply added the bank statements to her growing file. Then came the first sign. On a Thursday, Derek came home later than usual, irritation etched on his face. "Someone's been snooping around the office," he said, throwing his briefcase on the sofa, asking questions about me, about my future plans. "You know anything about that?" Maxine didn't look up from the book she held. "Why would I?" she asked, her tone soft. He studied her for a moment as if trying to read something beneath her calm. "Just a coincidence, that's all." She offered him a small smile. "Maybe someone's finally noticing all your hard work." If he heard the faint trace of irony in her voice, he didn't comment. The next week, Maxine made a subtle but crucial adjustment. She moved most of her personal belongings, including her heirlooms and irreplaceable documents, into a secure storage facility under her legal name, Maxine D. Costa. Derek didn't notice. What he did notice, however, was that her appearance was changing. She began wearing tailored dresses again, subtle but undeniably expensive. Jewels that had been stored away for years now sparkled on her wrists and neck. When he asked about it, she shrugged. "Thought I'd update my wardrobe for the gala." "The gala?" His brow furrowed. "What gala?" "The Marquis de Vega gala," she said. sipping her tea as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I was invited. He looked at her in disbelief. That's impossible. Those people don't even know who you are. Her lips curled into a soft, inscrutable smile. You'd be surprised who remembers me. From that moment on, Derek's curiosity turned into something sharper. He began asking more questions about her friends, her schedule, even her phone calls. But Maxine had been raised in the DaCosta world. She knew how to keep her secrets. Every answer she gave was just true enough to sound convincing, but vague enough to reveal nothing. Meanwhile, Elise was making her own preparations for the gala. The investigator reported that she had been telling her friends she expected Derek to propose to her officially soon, claiming he was going to leave his wife after the event. Maxine saved those voice messages too. As the date approached, the PE strategist executed the final phase of Maxine's public reemergence. Articles began to appear in business, columns about an influential heiress returning to the corporate scene. The articles didn't name her directly, but hinted strongly, citing her education, her family history, and her role in upcoming acquisitions. It was enough to spark speculation among London's elite. One night, just a week before the gala, Derek came home unusually early. He stopped in the doorway of her room, watching her as she organized papers into an elegant leather folder. You've been different lately, he said finally. Maxine looked up at his open expression. How so? More confident, put together, busy with things you don't talk about. She tilted her head. Isn't that what you wanted? Someone with ambition? The question hung between them, sharper than either of them expected. Derek opened his mouth, then closed it again. Just don't forget who's always been here for you, he said, the words more of a warning than a comfort. When he left the room, Maxine allowed herself a single deep breath. She was starting to feel it. The shift in balance, the shift in control, but he still had no idea how far she had gone. On the morning of the gala, Maxine stood in front of her mirror. The final dress she had chosen hung on the chair. It was a custom-made piece designed for her by a friend in Paris. Elegant, commanding, and impossible to ignore. She fastened a diamond necklace at her throat, one that had belonged to her grandmother. Her phone vibrated. It was Xavier. Everything is in place. Tonight's the night. She sent him a single reply. Make sure the photographers are ready. By night, the ballroom of the Tivoli Hotel would glow with London's most powerful. Elise would be there waiting for a proposal. Derek would be there expecting admiration. And Maxine would be there to deliver something else entirely, because once the lights hit her, there would be no turning back. What would you do if you had the same power as Marina? Would you use the information for revenge or to protect yourself? Leave your opinion in the comments. The verdict. The grand ballroom of the Tivoli Hotel was resplendent under crystal chandeliers. The air was alive with the hum of London's elite. Silk dresses glided over polished marble, the scent of roses and expensive perfume mingling in the air. Waiters moved among conversational groups, balancing trays of champagne flutes that caught the light like tiny suns. Derek stood near the entrance with Elise at his side, looking around as if he had finally arrived where he belonged. Elise wore a champagne-colored dress with a slit that drew more than a few stares, her hand possessively wrapped around his arm. She leaned in and whispered, "You're going to introduce me to the Marc de Vega tonight, right?" Derek smiled. "Just stay close. They'll know who we are very soon." What he didn't know was that the Marquis de Vega already knew exactly who was arriving, and it wasn't him. The room stirred as the doors opened. A silence fell so suddenly it was almost audible, as if the orchestra had missed a beat. Maxine entered. She wore a dress of rich emerald green silk that hugged her figure with an elegance money couldn't fake. The diamond necklace at her throat caught the light from the chandelier, scattering it across the room like a constellation. Her hair was swept into a polished chignon, a single diamond pin gleaming just above her ear. Every step she took seemed to part the crowd effortlessly. And she wasn't alone. At her side walked Simon Grant, CEO of Grant Holdings, one of London's most powerful financiers and a close friend of her late father. Maxine smiled as she moved through the crowd, her arm linked with Simon's. Conversations were cut off mid-sentence. Eyes followed her. Whispers ran through the room. Derek's smile faltered. He blinked as if unsure his eyes were telling him the truth. Elisa's fingers tightened on his arm. Who is she?" He didn't answer. Simon guided Maxine to the center of the ballroom. The hosts of the gala themselves greeted her warmly as if she were an old friend. Glasses clinked. A photographer's flash went off, then another. In a matter of minutes, the unspoken hierarchy of the room had shifted. Maxine was no longer the quiet wife no one noticed. She was the guest everyone wanted to be seen with. Derek's pulse quickened. He recognized that necklace. Once he had asked about it years ago, and Maxine had told him it was a family heirloom, nothing valuable. Now he was starting to understand just how in the dark he had been. When Simon excused himself to speak with the mayor, Maxine found herself face to face with her husband, Marina. His voice was low, and his smile was tight. "What are you doing here?" Her gaze swept over him with cold precision. "Enjoying the night?" Elise shifted uncomfortably beside him. "You didn't say your wife was invited." Maxine's eyes met hers, steady and knowing. "You must be Elise. I've heard so much about you." Elise's lips parted, then closed again. Something in Maxine's tone, polite but sharp as glass, left her without a retort. Before Derek could recover, the matriarch of the Mark de Vega family approached, linking her arm with Maxine's. "Darling, they're ready for you." "For me," Derek repeated, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Yes," the matriarch said, giving him a brief look before turning to Maxine. "The keynote speech." "We're delighted you accepted to speak. The DaCosta name means so much to our cause." Derek stood still. Elisa's head turned to him, but her eyes were fixed on Marina. "DaCosta," she repeated, the word slow, as if trying to grasp its size. Marina's smile was flawless. "I guess it was time you knew, Derek." The next 20 minutes were a masterclass in quiet power. Maxine took to the stage, speaking effortlessly about philanthropy, innovation, and the importance of strategic investment in London's future. Her voice was firm. Her posture was regal. Her presence was magnetic. The crowd hung on her every word. The cameras flashed. Every influential figure in the room now knew her name, and by extension knew exactly who Derek had been married to all along. From his spot near the back, Derek felt a knot in his stomach. Elisa's grip on his arm had loosened. Her eyes darted around the room, registering the shift in how people looked at them, or rather didn't look at them at all. Now they were invisible, and Maxine was the center of gravity. When the speech ended, applause echoed through the ballroom. Maxine descended from the stage into a whirlwind of handshakes and business card exchanges. Derek tried to intercept her, but Simon Grant was already at her side again, guiding her into a circle of CEOs and politicians. When Derek caught up, she was in the middle of a conversation with a governor. He touched her elbow lightly. "We need to talk." Her eyes turned to him, cold and distant. "Do we?" "Yes," he whispered, leaning in. "What the hell was that about DaCosta?" "Since when?" She cut him off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Since before I met you. But you never asked, did you?" He opened his mouth, but she was already turning away, nodding to another guest as if he didn't exist. Elise tugged on his arm. "Derek, you didn't tell me she was." "Shut up," he said, the weight of the night pressing down on him like a gag. Across the room, Mariah accepted another glass of champagne. Her diamond necklace caught the light again, and she could feel Derek's stare burning into her back, but she didn't turn around. Not yet, because tonight wasn't about confrontation. It was about planting the seed, and Derek was already starting to realize that whatever game he thought he was playing, he was desperately outmatched. And this was just the first move. The Marquis de Vega gala ended in a blur of brilliant conversations, clinking glasses and discreet business deals. Maxine left before midnight, not because she was tired, but because she knew Derek would follow. That was the point. Indeed, 15 minutes after she slipped into her waiting car, his black sedan pulled up behind her at the door of their suburban house. She could see him in the rear-view mirror, his jaw tight, his shoulders rigid, moving with the restless energy of a man whose world had tilted in ways he couldn't control. She was already in the kitchen when the front door slammed shut. "Marina?" His voice echoed down the hallway loud enough to startle the cat on the counter. "I'm in here," she called back, her tone exasperatingly calm. He peered in the doorway, still in his tuxedo, his tie loosened, his eyes blazing. "What the hell was that tonight?" She tilted her head slightly as if searching for clarity. "You'll have to be more specific." "Don't play dumb with me," he said. "Dosta, you've been a DaCosta all this time. Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" 7 years, Maxine. 7 years I've been looking for opportunities, struggling. While I what?" She cut him off, her voice firm, sharper now. "Lived the life you said you wanted. Supported you. Stayed silent when you complained about everything we didn't have. knowing full well I could have given you everything. He froze, taken aback by the precision of her words. You lied to me. She let out a short, humorless laugh. No, Derek, I didn't lie. You never asked. You were too busy looking for what you wanted to see to notice what was right in front of you. He took another step closer, lowering his voice as if the neighbors could hear. You should have told me. You could have used it. She cut him off. Her eyes fixed on his paraded me to get connections, taken credit for deals you didn't make. Spent it until nothing was left. His mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time, she saw hesitation in his eyes. Maxine, I'm your husband. We're supposed to share everything. Her smile was sharp. Funny you didn't share Elise with me. Color drained from his face. This isn't about her. Oh, it's exactly about her, she said, her voice soft but lethal. You thought, I was harmless, a quiet wife who would never know, never expect more. And because you thought that, you allowed yourself to believe you could have both, me at home and hair in your arm. He took another step forward, the air between them tense as a wire. You're twisting this. Elise means be careful, she warned, her gaze unwavering. You're about to say something you can't take back. For a moment, the kitchen was silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Derek's eyes searched hers, looking for some trace of the woman he had known. The one who would listen, forgive, and mend his mistakes. But she was gone, replaced by someone he couldn't predict. Finally, he exhaled and took a step back. So now what? You're going to leave me? Her smile returned slow and deliberate. If I were going to leave you, Derek, you'd already be alone. No, I think I'll stay. For now, he frowned. For now. Consider it a courtesy, she said, turning to the coffee machine, and as if the conversation was over. Time for you to think about who you're dealing with. He didn't move for several seconds. When he finally left the kitchen, she could hear the creak of the stairs under his weight, each step heavier than the last. Maxine poured herself a cup of coffee and carried it to the small desk in the corner. She opened her laptop, the glow illuminating her face as she reviewed the investigator's latest report. More photos, more messages, more ammunition. She didn't need to yell. She didn't need to throw him out, not yet. The real damage wouldn't be done in this kitchen or in the privacy of their home. It would be done where it mattered most to Derek in the eyes of everyone whose approval he craved. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from the PR strategist. We've confirmed Elise is going to the Castle Foundation dinner next week. Shall we proceed? Maxine replied. Absolutely. She leaned back in her chair, letting the aroma of the coffee envelop her like a slow burning fuse. Derek thought the explosion had been tonight, but that was just the spark. When the fire hit him, there would be nothing left to save. What would you do if you had the same power as Maxine? Use the information for revenge or to protect yourself? Leave your opinion in the comments. The fall from grace. The Castle Foundation dinner was more subdued than the Marquis de Vega Gala, but no less exclusive, held at the historic Sour Castle. It was the kind of event where every handshake could mean millions, and every whispered conversation had the potential to shift power in London. Maxine arrived exactly 20 minutes past the start time, ensuring she was noticed without looking like she was trying. She wore a night blue silk dress, the fabric flowing around her like water, her grandmother's sapphire earrings catching the soft candlelight. This time she came alone. She didn't need an escort. Her name was enough. Across the room she saw Derek and Elise before they saw her. Elise wore a bright crimson dress that was a little too tight, her smile a little too bright. Derek played his part, attentive, confident. But there was a tension in his posture that Maxine hadn't seen before. He was looking for her. She let them wait. Instead, she moved through the room with precision, greeting donors, exchanging pleasantries with political figures, stopping to be photographed with other board members. Every introduction included her full name, Maxine D. Costa Jack. She saw the glint of recognition in people's eyes, the way conversation shifted when she spoke. Half an hour in, she finally approached them. Derek's face tightened. Elise's widened in surprise. Maxine? Derek said stiffly. Derek. Elise. Maxine's tone was warm, almost friendly. You both look comfortable. Elise straightened, sensing the subtle barb beneath the words. We were just talking about the auction later. Derek's going to bid on a trip to the Amalfi Coast for me. Oh, is he? Maxine smiled, tilting her head. How generous of you, Derek, considering your recent financial challenges. He stiffened. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course not, she replied softly before turning to Elise. I hear congratulations are in order. They say you're expecting an official change in your relationship soon. Elise's painted-on smile faltered. I don't like gossip. No need, Maxine said, her soft voice all the more cutting. I already know. Before either of them could reply, the dinner bell chimed and guests began to move towards the long banquet tables. Maxine took her seat near the front next to the evening's keynote speaker, a tech entrepreneur who had just signed a lucrative partnership with one of her holding companies. From her vantage point, she could see Derek and Elise several tables back. Elise's smile was gone now, her posture rigid. The real moment came during the auction. A week before, Maxine had discreetly arranged for a special lot to be added, a weekend getaway to the Phoenix Hotel, the same rooftop hotel where Derek had secretly proposed to Elise. She had even provided the photograph for the display screen, one taken by her investigator, showing the exact moment Derek slipped the ring on Elise's finger. The image had been carefully cropped so that only their hands were visible, but the watch on Derek's wrist was unmistakable. When the lot came up on the screen, murmurs rippled through the room. Derek's face lost all color. Elise stared straight ahead, frozen. Do I hear an opening bid of 10,000? The auctioneer said. Maxine raised her paddle without hesitation. 10. Another bidder across the room joined in and the number climbed. Derek kept his head down, but Maxine could feel his stare burning into her. She didn't care if she won the lot. The point had already been made. When the hammer fell at 15,000 to another bidder, the image was already seared into the minds of half the room. During dessert, Derek finally approached her, his voice low but filled with rage. That was deliberate. Maxine sipped her coffee. If you're referring to my coming to dinner, yes, I was invited. You know what I'm referring to? Her eyes met his, calm and unbreakable. I've learned something, Derek. If you want to hurt someone, you don't shout. You let the truth do the work for you. He clenched his teeth. What do you want from me? She leaned in just enough for only him to hear. Patience, because this is only the beginning. Leaving him there, she returned to her seat as the final speeches began. She didn't need to look back to know he was watching her, torn between fury and fear. Across the table, one of the Castle Foundation board members leaned in. You know, when I heard Adi Costa was returning to London, I didn't expect this. Maxine smiled faintly. Neither did he. The night ended with polite applause and discreet farewells. Outside, the cool night air enveloped her as she descended the stone steps. An elegant black car waited at the curb. Xavier's driver. She slid into the back seat, the city lights reflecting in the window. Her phone vibrated with a message from the investigator. You'll want to see the footage from tonight. The police made a call after the auction. Very interesting. Maxine's lips curved. Another piece for the file. Another step toward the inevitable. And soon, Derek wouldn't just feel like the walls were closing in on him. He would realize there was no way out. Do you think Derek deserves what's happening to him? Leave your opinion in the comments. On Monday morning, Derek could feel it. Something in the air at work had changed. Conversation stopped when he entered the break room. Colleagues avoided eye contact. His usually chatty assistant kept her answers short, and her gaze fixed on her computer. It didn't take long for him to find out why. Someone had circulated the photo from the Castle Foundation auction around the office, even though the image didn't show Elise's face. The watch and distinctive cufflinks Derek wore to the event were enough for people to connect the dots. At lunch, he was called into his supervisor's office. Derek, the partners are concerned, she began carefully. Between the merger complications and the image issues from your personal life, we've concluded that it's best we part ways. Derek's pulse quickened. You're firing me? Your contract will... To be honored, she said, sliding a folder across the table. But effective immediately, your position here is terminated. He was escorted out by security before lunch. When he arrived at his apartment, Elise was packing. Where are you going? Head demanded. She didn't even stop folding a sequined dress into her suitcase. You think I'm staying for this? Everyone is talking, Derek. I'm being frozen out of every circle I worked to get into, and now you lost your job. I can fix this, he insisted, though the words sounded empty even to him. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. You can't fix this. She's dismantling you piece by piece, and you don't even know how deep she goes. At least don't. She zipped her suitcase. Call me when you're not a sinking ship. She was gone in less than an hour. For the rest of the day, Derek sat in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on him. Phone calls from friends stopped. Emails went unanswered. Even his social media accounts were a graveyard of past boasts and unreturned messages. That night, there was a knock at the door. When he opened it, Maxine was standing there in a simple black coat, her expression unreadable. May I come in? She asked. He stepped aside, not knowing what else to do. She entered slowly, her gaze swept over the apartment. The expensive furniture, the empty champagne bottles, the half-packed boxes. You've been busy, she said softly. Why are you here? His voice was hoarse. To tell you something, she turned to face him. Everything that happened, the gala, the dinner, the summit, that was just me pulling back the curtain. The rest you did to yourself. His jaw tightened. You planned all this. I prepared for it. She corrected. The moment I saw you at that wine bar with her, I knew the man I thought I'd married didn't exist, so I stopped protecting you. Derek's hands clenched into fists at his sides. You could have just left me. She shook her head. Leaving you would have been a gift. You didn't deserve one. He took a step towards her. You wanted to ruin me. No, she said, her voice low and precise. I wanted you to understand that when you betray someone who gave you everything, the cost is everything you have left. The silence between them was heavy, filled with all the things he couldn't say, apologies he didn't believe, excuses she wouldn't accept. Finally, she reached into her purse and took out an envelope. She set it on the counter. This is your severance from the trust fund accounts. I'm cutting you off completely. Consider it the last payment you'll receive from me. He stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. What am I supposed to do now? She met his eyes. Survive or don't. Either way, it's no longer my problem. With that, she turned and walked to the door. Maxine, he called out to her. She paused with her hand on the doorknob. I never thought you'd do this to me, he said, his voice breaking a little. She looked over her shoulder. That's because you never thought I could. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving him in the dark, silent apartment. That night, Derek scrolled through his phone until he came to an old photo. The two of them on their wedding day, smiling, oblivious to the future. Hestered at it until the screen went black, the room around him shrinking into darkness. Across the city, Maxine sat in her penthouse office reviewing the final documents for the launch of the new DaCosta Foundation. Her name had returned to its rightful place, and her reputation was stronger than ever. The people who mattered knew her story now, and they knew she had the strength to protect herself. But it wasn't over yet. There was one last stage, one public event that would cement her return and leave Derek with nothing more than the memory of what he had lost. And when that night came, she would make sure it was unforgettable. 2 months later, the most anticipated event of the London season arrived. The DaCosta Foundation's relaunch gala. The invitations had been coveted for weeks with only the city's most influential figures on the guest list. It was to be held at the historic Langston Hall, a venue reserved for the kind of moments that would be talked about for decades. For Maxine, it was more than just a gala. It was the full restoration of her place in the world on her own terms, with her own name. Every detail had been planned with precision, from the champagne imported from her family's French vineyards to the orchids flown in that morning. She arrived early, entering the grand ballroom in a floor-length gown of rich gold, a color that radiated strength and warmth. The sapphire pendant rested against her collarbone, glowing under the chandeliers. She moved through the final checks with her team, calm but electric inside. This night was hers. Guests began to arrive, the flash of cameras greeting each one. Politicians, CEOs, philanthropists, and old money families streamed in, eager to be seen in attendance. Maxine greeted them with genuine warmth, introducing partners for the foundation's new initiatives. The press was everywhere, capturing the faces, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, and then, almost predictably, Derek appeared. He wasn't on the guest list, but he had found a way in, likely through some desperate contact who owed him a favor. He wore a dark suit that didn't fit as well as it used to, and there was an edge of desperation in his eyes. He approached as she was speaking with the mayor. "Maxine, can we talk?" She didn't break her smile, simply excused herself from the conversation. "You shouldn't be here, Derek. I just need 1 minute." She studied him for a moment. "What, 1 minute?" They stepped into a quieter corner of the ballroom. The music and chatter were still a soft hum. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low. "I made mistakes, I know. But maybe, just maybe, we could start over." Her expression didn't change. "Derek, you didn't just break a promise. You broke the foundation of trust we stood on. And when it crumbled, you thought you could just build again on the same ground. You can't," he swallowed hard. "I've lost everything." "That was your choice," she said simply. Before he could respond, the event coordinator approached. "Maxine DeCosta, we're ready for your speech." She turned to Derek. "Enjoy the rest of your night from the sidelines." She walked toward this stage as applause erupted. The ballroom light softened. A single spotlight illuminated her as she approached the podium. "Good evening," she began. Her voice carried with quiet authority. "Tonight is about more than the relaunch of a foundation. It's about resilience, about taking back your voice when others tried to take it from you." She spoke of the foundation's projects, educational programs, grants for female entrepreneurs, community revitalization efforts. But woven into her words was a deeper message, one the crowd could feel. "There was a time," she said, "when I believed love meant hiding parts of myself to make someone else feel bigger. I was wrong. True partnership is not about dimming your light for someone else's comfort. It's about shining together and knowing that if someone can't stand in that light with you, they have no place in your future." The applause intensified, filling the ballroom like a wave. Cameras flashed. In the corner, Derek stood still, his face unreadable as the crowd rose to its feet to give a standing ovation. When the speech ended, Maxine descended into a sea of congratulations. Deals were discussed. Promises were made. Photos were taken. Her name, Maxine DeCosta, was on everyone's lips, no longer hidden, no longer tied to anyone but herself. At midnight, the ballroom was a whirlwind of music and laughter. Maxine stood on the balcony overlooking the harbor, the city lights shimmering below. Xavier joined her, handing her a glass of champagne. "It's done," he said simply. She nodded. "It's just the beginning." They clinked glasses. She took a slow sip, feeling the cool air on her skin, the hum of satisfaction in her chest. Somewhere behind her, Derek had already left. His departure had gone unnoticed, and that was the final truth. He was no longer part of her story. Maxine smiled to herself, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Because this wasn't just revenge. It was a rebirth. This is it, my friends. Our story has come full circle. And if you're still here with me right now, watching to the end, I believe that something in this journey touched your heart in a way you didn't expect. Maybe it stirred a memory. Maybe it mirrored something you've gone through. Or maybe, just maybe, it simply reminded you of the strength you already carry within you. See, this wasn't just a story about betrayal and revenge. It was a story about resilience, about choosing not to let someone else's actions define your worth. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Maxine could have broken, but instead she chose Torbild. Not for him, but for herself. There's another quote from Marcus Aurelius that I often think about. "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That's exactly what we saw here. She didn't sink to Derek's level. She rose above him, taking back her life with dignity, power, and grace. Perhaps that is the real lesson for you and me. We can't always control what people do to us, but we can always choose our response. We can choose to heal, to grow, to stand taller than before. And in doing so, we become untouchable. So if you're going through something right now, a heartbreak, a betrayal, a loss, remember, you are stronger than you think. The pain you feel now is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your comeback.